Hi everyone, just to let you know, due to the large volume of people registering, we're just allowing a couple of minutes for everyone to log in, to dial in. And oh, there she is. We were also waiting on one speaker who had to dial in externally as well for it to work IT-wise, which of course you always see happening. So considering the time, let's give it one more minute and then we'll. All right, I think we'll get going. There's still people joining us, I can see, but let's hope that within a couple of minutes that will all be sorted. So good afternoon, everyone. Can I ask, I've got a little bit of feedback, so if anyone's got their mic open, I'd ask them to mute themselves. I'm Anna Jansen, I'm Head of European Engagement at UKI, and welcome to what probably will be the last iteration of the webinar series as we've been doing them. The goal of the last 2.5 years has been really for us to keep you up to date on all the developments in negotiations. And of course, with now the trade agreement being agreed, that part of it comes to an end. And yeah, like I said, we wanted to keep you up to date, not just the UK audience, but also a European audience, and what the impact of all of this was for higher education institutions and for research partners as well. It doesn't mean that you're not quite rid of us yet. I would imagine the coming years will follow up with more specific webinars, you know, as things are unfolding on student mobility, but also on the research side. I would imagine we will be doing dedicated specific webinars on these issues, but these type of webinars where we really aim to give you an overview of all the different things that were happening and are relevant for you and for higher education and research organizations. That kind of big, grand helicopter view type of webinar will probably end after this one, unsurprisingly. Before I continue, allow me to introduce to you my two lovely colleagues who will be joining me today for this webinar. With us is Miriam Lawrence, who is the Regional Director for Europe, Russia, Israel and Turkey at the UK Science and Innovation Network. And also joining us is Inga Benner, who is the Deputy Director of the UK Research Office in Brussels. And Inga, as always, will be joining us for Q&A at the end of the webinar. Again, I'm having a bit of feedback, so if anyone has their mics open, I'd ask you to mute them. In terms of housekeeping, as always, a recording of the webinar and the slides will be sent to you within a couple of days, so you don't have to worry about that. And as always, do send your questions that you have during the webinar through the chat function. We have our one-woman tech support, Donna, working behind the scene, and she will collect questions that you have and feed them to us at the end of it when we have the Q&A session. Just a little bit of a disclaimer, what we're sharing with you today is for information purposes only. Don't confuse it with legal advice. So I would say don't not do anything or do anything based on this if you are, for example, in the area of T&E, I think where this is most applicable, thinking about doing engaging in certain activities in Europe, you should always get your legal advice and not just go on what we are saying today. So with that being said, just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to discuss today. As you can imagine, the focus will be primarily on the EU programs, but we'll also talk about other things such as data and MLPQ, and some other things that were not part of the deal but are changing. And the idea behind this very last webinar was, let's give you everything that is now changing in one big go, so that hopefully you'll have everything in one place. And with that said, I'll now hand over to Miriam, who will start with giving you an overview of the deal. Miriam, over to you.
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for joining today. Really pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you. As Anna said, my name is Miriam. I work for the Science and Innovation Network, which is a team of people right across embassies in Europe, working to support the relationship between UK and EU across all areas of science, innovation and research, and the kind of wider higher education sector as well. I'm not going to go into loads of detail on the deal itself. I'm sure you will all have read the headlines and be familiar with it, but I just wanted to give a very quick overview of the context of this. So the deal is known as the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, because it covers both trade, all the arrangements for zero tariff, zero quota trade, but also cooperation on a whole range of other issues like transport and travel, law enforcement, security cooperation, all kinds of different things. As Anna was saying, leaving the EU and leaving the end of the transition period as well does mean a whole different range of changes to how we work with the EU, how we work with colleagues there, and how we collaborate with them in different ways. So we're going to run through lots of different aspects of that. But I'm going to focus particularly on the EU programmes that we are going to be working with from now on, and how that forms part of our kind of wider vision and ambition for really strong relationship with the EU as a whole and with European member states across science, research and innovation. So if we have the next slide, please. So as hopefully lots of you will be aware, the UK is going to associate with Horizon Europe, with the Euratom Research and Training Programme, with ITER and with Copernicus. I'm going to come back to a little bit about the process and a very small caveat there, but that's the kind of broad picture. And I think that's really, really good news for researchers in the UK and for researchers across Europe. It really gives a solid foundation for continued collaboration. And it's part of the UK government's wider commitment to scientific excellence and to supporting the broader research sector. And our participation in these programmes will make sure that the UK is still part of cross-border networks, that we still have access to supply chains for new and innovative goods and so on. As you'll no doubt also be aware, unfortunately, we were not able to agree the terms for participation in Erasmus+. Despite hard work by negotiators on both sides. I know this will be a disappointment for lots of people, but I think I just wanted to make clear that, you know, we did try very hard. It was always our goal that we would try and find terms that worked for everybody. Unfortunately, it just didn't work for the UK. What was on offer, the amount of money that we would have to contribute as kind of net contribution over what we got out was simply too high. But what that does mean, you know, the UK does absolutely value student mobility, understands the importance of students having the opportunity to study overseas, and that's why there's a new scheme that is being set up by the Department for Education to enable that to happen in Europe and beyond Europe. And May's going to talk about that a little bit more, and I'm happy to answer questions on it as well. But just to kind of outline what's in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement on programmes, there's a whole chapter devoted to them, which functions as a kind of framework agreement that sets out the arrangements for participation, governance, the UK's financial contributions and so on. And then there's a kind of a protocol to the agreement which sets out the more detailed terms and conditions of exactly how the UK will associate to the 4 programmes listed above. That has been published in a draft form if you're particularly interested. But if we go to the next slide, just to kind of explain where we are. The reason why that's only in draft is because, first of all, the EU, which has been going through its own process to complete the ratification of their multi-annual financial framework, and that is where they're also going to ratify their regulations for Horizon Europe. And at that point, once we know exactly what those regulations look like, we can finalise the protocol, which will finalise the terms and conditions for UK association. So that's where there does come the caveat that if the EU changes those regulations, if they're finalised in a way that impacts on how we participate, then we reserve the right to reconsider. But I think my personal view is that that's unlikely at this stage, and so fingers crossed we will get to the point over the coming months where the UK will formally associate once those step to complete. And once we're formally associated, then UK researchers, either leading or as part of the consortia, can respond to calls. If we could go to the next slide. So what does that actually mean? How will it work? Broadly speaking, more or less the same as it has before. As an associate member of Horizon, we'll participate in more or less the same terms as EU members. It's very different from third country participation, which is more limited. So you should find it's a kind of user experience if you're a UK researcher, or if you are an EU researcher with UK members of your team or your project, you should find that things work more or less the same. You can continue to bid into grants. You can, the UK organisations can lead or influence projects. You can also, and that applies for European Research Council grants. It applies for the Mary Skłodowska Curie Action Programmes, which support research, career development and mobility. So nearly everything. The one exception is the Equity Fund, which is part of the European Innovation Council. The UK won't participate in that. That's already the case. We don't participate in at the moment. But other aspects of the European Innovation Council, we will still participate in as we do now. If we could go to the next slide. In terms of other programs, just to rattle through in case there are people who are interested in these ones as well. So we'll participate in Copernicus. Copernicus is part of the EU space program. It's the world's largest observation satellite with a predominantly environmental focus. So the UK has been involved in that for a long time and will continue to be so. It's a really important part of how we're contributing to building an evidence base on really important issues like climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and biodiversity. So again, we're waiting for the EU to finalise the EU space regulations, but we expect that UK organisations, businesses and so on can bid into Copernicus contracts. We're not part of Galileo, but we are part of other EU space programmes like the Space Surveillance and Tracking Programme, which is all about finding ways to protect infrastructure from collisions with debris and things like that, monitor debris that might be coming into the atmosphere. And finally, also the Euratom Research and Training Programme, which is a large nuclear research area. UK will participate in that. We'll also be part of ITER, which is the large thermonuclear reactor in the south of France, looking to find energy from nuclear fusion. So lots of very exciting and innovative bits of research the UK absolutely will continue to be part of. If we go to the next slide, please. So that's a bit of a rattle through the programmes and what they mean. I think the kind of important point for us is that the UK absolutely sees international collaboration as fundamental to our ambitions to be a world-leading science power. We think that Europe is a huge part of that picture, and that Horizon Europe and the other programmes is part of the way that we will ensure that these partnerships continue. We want to make the most of those opportunities. I really want to encourage UK researchers to consider how to make the most of these opportunities and participate in these projects. Encourage our European colleagues who might be listening today to think about how to involve UK researchers in your projects as well. We really want to support that as much as we can, and I'm always interested if there's more that we can do. It's also only the start. We want to continue to look at other ways that we can support the research collaboration between countries, bilaterally as well as multilaterally. And finally, I just wanted to emphasise that this is, you know, a difficult year, but a year that's shown the importance of science more than ever. And for the UK, we have a real opportunity with the presidents of both the G7 and of COP26 this year. And we really want to emphasise the importance of science and international science, particularly in tackling global challenges, promoting commitment to open science, to trusted research. And we know that the excellence of UK researchers is a huge part of that picture, but only part of it. It has to be international, it has to be collaborative, and we're really looking forward to what else we can do to support that. I'll hand back to you, Emily.
Oh, sorry, I'm just now unmuted. Just to say thank you, Miriam, for that. And as she already said, we are no longer in Erasmus. So what does that effectively mean for the program that ended at the end of last year and our participation or not in the new program? So for the previous program, it is good to know that any funding that UK partners and UK universities or institutions have secured under that specific program are protected, covered by the withdrawal agreement, and that includes mobilities and projects running beyond the 31st of December 2020. You know, it's just as long as mobilities that are happening still now and will in the future are funded by the previous Erasmus program, that is all covered by the withdrawal agreement, and UK institutions will be treated as member states for the duration of those projects. So nothing will change there. And then this is not so much due to Brexit, this is due to COVID, but important to highlight that the Commission has made it possible to extend the interinstitutional agreements in light of COVID, and of course a lot of mobility funds that are not being spent due to the pandemic, and that can be stretched until 2023. So that means that EU-based institutions can still use that money until the end of that extension to send students to the UK. So looking towards the next Erasmus program, even though we are not going to be part of it, there are some few things that I think are relevant to mention. The UK becomes, or is as of now for the next program, a non-associated partner country, and that means that we only have access to Jean Monnet and the Erasmus Mundus joint master degree course. And for the latter, it's important to know that not only can UK institutions participate in these consortia, they can also lead them. As you probably all have heard, the Irish government made an announcement that they want to fund Northern Irish-based students to go on Erasmus through their institution. So effectively, that would mean that Northern Irish students would register with an Irish institution and therefore then be entitled to an Erasmus grant. The UK government is aware of it, and the Commission is aware of it as well. We've reached out to both, but they're basically just saying we'll have to have a look on the legalities of all of this and just see how, you know, if this is possible. So I would imagine we'll hear in the future more about if it is possible, how they're going to make it work. And then another, I think, minor but important thing is that in the new Erasmus program, the new Key Action 103 has a different name. They're getting new numbers, but what is in the previous program called Key Action 3 has a small new budget envelope for international mobility that could be used by European institutions to send their students to the UK. Then over to the Turing Scheme, which is the domestic alternative that the UK government has been developing, you know, with the risk of the UK not associating, and that's what happened. The UK government will be publishing more information about this in the next couple of weeks. So when that happens, our Outward Student Mobility team will come with a dedicated webinar to you, running you through all the nitty-gritty on what it means and how universities can engage with it. But what we can tell you up until now is that it's £100 million that have been signed to this scheme to send up to 35,000 UK-based students to study and work abroad. It's a scheme that will have global destinations. It includes all the devolved nations. It will also make sure that universities get organizational support funding to administer the scheme, and it has a focus on widening participation students. As you've probably all seen in the press, what some of the things that it doesn't include is it won't fund staff mobility. There is no funding for inbound mobility, unlike a lot of people say the Swiss scheme. That's correct, this one doesn't. And it won't replicate Key Action 2 and 3 from Erasmus, so no strategic partnerships and such. The British Council will administer the first year of this programme, and the UK government and us as well as a sector, we're actually quite keen to start engaging with European partners and national ministries across Europe to talk about bilateral agreements and match funding for the Turing Scheme, so that students across Europe can come to the UK with national funding backing their backing their mobility in the UK. So we're really looking at a different model of funding mobility rather than how it's done in Erasmus. This will be done then on basis of bilateral agreements, and then hopefully other governments will want to put some money behind sending their students to the UK and provide match funding. As I said, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, more details about how it's going to work, how universities can engage with it, what the criteria are, and what the admin and the evaluation processes, and how to bid for funding. All of that will be published within a few weeks. We hope within 2 weeks, and then our Outward Student Mobility team will get back to you with a very dedicated webinar about that. Then two separate issues. Now we are switching to the non-EU programs related bit of this webinar. First up, the mutual recognition of professional qualifications. So as you know, as the directive doesn't apply anymore to the UK, the mutual recognition of professional qualification has come to an end. So that means that at the moment, students who, or anyone who is going to get a professional degree that they need to have recognized and want to offer their services in, so an EU student in the UK or a UK-based qualification in the EU, then you'd have to go through the national authorities in that member state to get your UK degree recognized, as you would do the other way around. A student with a UK-based qualification, professional qualification, would have to get that recognized in the UK. Just to repeat again, this is different from academic qualifications. They are fine, they are part of the Bologna process, and they will continue to be recognized. This is really strictly about professional qualifications. So that is what the situation is at the moment. And what I can say is, for those who had their professional qualifications already recognized in the past, or those who submitted the request to have their degree recognized prior to the end of last year, they are still covered by the withdrawal agreement and should be fine. But then anyone who is now studying or will get their degree in the future, they would have to get it recognized in the specific member state that they want to offer their services. Now, there is some positive news in the trade and cooperation agreement on MLPQ, because even though, again, the directive doesn't apply anymore, it gives the possibility for, it kind of gives you a framework for professional bodies and national authorities to submit a joint recommendation to what they're calling the Partnerships Council to get a specific degree, a specific professional qualification recognized. Now, if that Partnership Council then approves that joint recommendation, that means that you will have a mutual recognition of that specific professional qualification between the UK and the entire EU. So, for example, if a professional body in the UK would team up with one or more professional bodies across Europe within the member states, and they would submit that joint recommendation, they could get, if the Partnerships Council agrees, they could get that recognised between the UK and the Union. This doesn't preclude professional bodies seeking bilateral recognition between two countries, so that's also still possible. But I think in light of things, it's actually quite positive that we have the route, the avenue to try and get professional degrees recognised between the UK and the EU. And then on data, what I can say there, it's quite straightforward. They've built in a sort of a bridge clause, if you like, that for a period of 4 to maximum 6 months, everything stays the same as it is right now. And within that period, the UK hopefully will get the EU adequacy decision. So the adequacy decision is the process through which the EU will determine whether or not the UK has sufficiently high safeguards in place to protect data, personal data. And if the answer to that is yes, and the UK gets that data adequacy decision, then at that point, this bridge period will end, and the data can flow as it does right now. And maybe I'm optimistic or naive, but I'm personally thinking that we'll probably get this sorted within now and 6 months, and that data exchanges, hopefully in the future, won't be an issue. But over to transnational education. Now, this is complicated, and we've tried to give you a relatively high level, hopefully easy to digest overview of what this might mean. Basically, I'm saying to you, my colleague Eduardo Ramos, who is our head of transnational education, who's absolutely brilliant, he knows the nitty-gritty way more and way better than I do. So on the next slide, you'll have his email address. And if you've got any specific to me related questions or barriers that you're encountering, I would highly recommend you to contact him. But with him, I've tried to present to you this overview, basically, which hopefully just gives you a grip, a handle on what's changing there. So because the freedom of establishment and the freedom of movement of services between the UK and the EU, of course, has ended, we now are presented with a different legal framework. And the agreement includes provisions that are more limited, that are different and more limited for privately funded UK education services to the EU member states. So just to flag that this is about private funded education services, because publicly funded education services remain the exclusive competence of member states. So this does not apply to publicly funded education, just private funded. So for existing T&E provision, the agreement establishes that any limitations need to be consistent with those applied to local and or third country providers. And that depends on the type of T&E model and on what kind of country the UK institution is providing it. And in practice, this means that UK universities can continue to provide education through T&E in member states under similar conditions granted to those to local and or third country providers. Protection applies except in those cases where member states have introduced reservations or exemptions. So, for example, foreign higher education institutions cannot establish subsidiaries in Bulgaria, but they may open faculties or departments as part of, for example, a Bulgarian high school and in cooperation with Bulgarian institutions. For future T&E provision, the same protection applies, except where member states, again, have introduced reservations. 6 member states have introduced what they call blanket reservations, and that means that they have the right to adopt or maintain any measure in respect of the supply of privately funded higher education service, and those countries are Austria, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Finland, Malta, and Romania. And then there are another 4 that have introduced reservations to just a specific aspect of T&E provision, meaning, for example, the composition of a board of directors. And these are the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Sweden. Now we've tried to kind of try to put it into 3 main situations for UK T&E provision. The first is in EU member states that have not registered reservations. Conditions can be applied on a non-discriminatory basis to existing and future T&E provision, and these conditions cannot constitute a limitation around market access, local presence, or national treatment as described in the agreement. The second is in EU member states that have registered specific reservations. There are conditions to existing or future T&E provisions that can be applied following the text of the reservation. So, for example, again, Bulgaria, UK universities can open faculties with local providers, but they cannot do independent branch campuses. And then the third is in an EU member state that have registered the blanket reservations for future provisions. Any condition could be applied to in the future, including discriminatory ones that are outside of the scope of the agreement. So yeah, some light reading there. In practice, it means that just depending on the specific member state, conditions could be imposed and a whole list of conditions. So for example, licensing, national accreditation, legal form, national requirements, requirements on recruitment of foreign personnel, student numbers, access to government support, and the list goes on and on and on. It is very technical, it is very detailed, and I'm telling you again, anyone with specific T&E questions, contact my colleague Eduardo, and he will be able to give you more information. That being said, we are constantly in discussion with government to try and pick out how this works for T&E, because it's such a difficult legal aspect that, of course, for us, it's also, we're still trying to wrap our minds around what this all means. But this is our understanding right now. And if you've got any questions, contact my lovely colleague. Then over to immigration, what's in the TCA on immigration. You've got visa-free travel for tourists visiting up to 90 days within a 180-day period. Additional actions might be required if you travel into the EU for study or business. And just a flag, and I will repeat this when we are at the student mobility section of our presentation, UKI has commissioned some legal advice which we'll be publishing hopefully by the end of January, where we basically have asked the legal firm to collate all the information of the immigration requirements for the EU27 for business trips, but also mobility up until a year for work and study placements. So that we will be distributing that to our members when it's done for them and for the international offices to use that advice. So the new rules do not apply to travel to Ireland, and British and Irish citizens can continue to move freely between the UK and Ireland as part of the common travel area arrangements. As you probably know, on the 1st of January, the UK new point-based system came into effect. For anyone interested, I've got a link to a presentation later down the line in my presentation for a webinar that goes into quite a lot of detail about the points-based system and all these different scenarios, students coming, researchers coming. I would highly recommend you having a look at that. And then, of course, just to remind you that EU citizens who arrive in the UK prior to the 31st of December 2020 have until the 30th of June 2021 to apply to the EU settlement scheme. So now we're going to switch to a couple of topics that are not part of the TCA. So the whole trade and cooperation agreement bit is done now, but we thought it would be helpful to include this as well, because these are the things that have changed as well. And we just wanted, like I said, wanted to give you everything in one place. On student fees for EU students coming to the UK, there are 3 scenarios depending on when they are going to study and when they arrive in the UK. So EU students starting a full degree course this academic year and who have arrived before December 31st, 2020, home fee status applies in all the nations, and tuition fee loans are available in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and they are eligible to apply for the UK EU settlement scheme. Then EU students starting a full degree course this academic year but arriving after December 31st, 2020, again, home fee status and tuition fee loan applies, but they need to apply for a student visa through the new student route and are eligible to apply for the graduate route. And I will come back to the student route and the graduate route in the next 2 slides. Then EU students starting a full degree course next academic year and arriving after the 31st December of 2020, international fees apply to these students, and they also need to apply for a visa through the new student route and will be eligible to apply for the graduate route. So just a few words on international fees. They differ greatly between universities and the sort of course you want to do. So the advice we really tend to give to EU students is have a look, contact the university that you're interested in and ask about the specific course you're interested in, because we've got quite a broad range in terms of international fees that can vary between 12 and 25,000. So 12 on the lower end and 25 on the higher end. And there are, of course, universities that are even higher than that, but those are outliers. So, on average, it's between 12 and 25. So it's definitely worth reaching out to the specific university to ask about the specific course you're interested in. When it comes to Irish citizens, they can apply to the EU settlement scheme. They don't have to, because their rights are protected under the common travel area agreements, and the change in visa status won't apply to them, and any benefits and services and rights again are protected under the CTA agreement. As promised, the student route and the graduate route. The student route went live on the 5th of October and allows individuals to apply up to 6 months before the course starts. It applies to all international students of EU and non-EU, and an application costs £348, and the immigration health surcharge is £470 a year. It's a points-based system, but it's based off of the old Tier 4, in case anyone is an immigration expert. So very little has changed in practice. Then the graduate route is due to launch this summer, and it will provide students with a 2-year period and PhD students with a 3-year period to work or look for work in the UK after they've graduated. The details still need to be finalised, but the current thinking is that students would have to do their entire degree in the UK. Then over to, as I already hinted previously, that short-term study and work arrangements, and we already got some questions prior to the webinar to discuss this. Before I dive in, I think it's good to let you know that we are talking to the government about the long-term solution to some of the issues I'll be addressing, and that is having a dedicated immigration route for education exchanges that would cover study and work placements. They are open to it. We've been talking about it to them in the summer already, but due to everything going on, there just wasn't capacity to do it. And at the moment, of course, everyone is busy with what this deal means and implementing all of these things. But we will continue to talk to government and hopefully in the medium to long term get a dedicated route, immigration route in place that would cover study up until a year, work up until a year for anyone who wants to come to the UK from the EU. So that being said, at the moment, if you want to come to the UK to study here for less than 6 months, then students can come under the visitor route, provided it's at an accredited institution. And this is not a visa route, so basically that means that the student can come to the UK using their e-passports. Then for students who want to come to the UK for mobility study placements between 6 and 12 months, they at the moment will have to go through the student route. And we of course are very much aware that this is a very expensive route for someone who just wants to come to the UK for on average 9 months. EU students on average stay in the UK 9 months. So we are aware of this, the government is aware of this, and we've asked the government if they cannot make some concessions on this, because the student would also has an English language requirement. So we're basically asking them for mobility students, drop the language requirement, lower the fees because they're only coming for a short period. And this could be a bridge, hopefully, up until the point where we have this dedicated immigration route. Then over to work placements. There unfortunately still is some uncertainty around how the new immigration system will facilitate students who want to come to the UK in a work placement. What we're basically, for those technical experts out there, what we're basically asking government is to keep the Erasmus programme on the government-approved exchange scheme list, and that would allow students who come to the UK through Erasmus with the funding of the previous programme to the UK through the Tier 5 temporary work route. This would mean for students who could do that, this would mean that they would have to pay a fee and immigration health charge. They have to provide biometrics. They have to provide a passport or a travel document, and also a certificate of sponsorship. So it is a pretty admin heavy and also not a cheap route, but it would again be a temporary solution until we have an immigration route that would cover work placements as well. Then really briefly on health insurance, meaning EHIC and GHIC. So the UK will no longer be issuing EHICs, the European Health Insurance Card. The cards that have been issued previously can be used until their expiry date. Then after that, or if you don't have one now and you need a new one, if you're in the UK, you need to apply for the UK replacement, which is the UK Global Health Insurance Card, the GHIC. The GHIC covers some medical care, like the EHIC. It's not a replacement for travel insurance, and the GHIC won't be valid in Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland, which means for those students, UK students in Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, or Switzerland at the moment, and who've been there already before the end of last year, they will have to apply for a new UK issued EHIC. This is the only exception, I think, that the UK still issues new EHICs, because the old UK EHICs and the GHICs don't apply in these 4 countries, so you'll need your new EHIC. Then separate from that, UK students going to the EU, again, like I said, you need to apply for a GHIC, but a GHIC that is time limited for the length of time that the course is. And then students would need a letter from their university or college saying, their UK educational institution name and address, where they're going to study, details of the qualification, and the dates of the course start and that is due to finish. Then, as promised, a slide with links to information. So the first link is to an extended briefing that we have done and is on the UK website. And it talks about all the things that I've just said and that Miriam just explained and more. It has FAQs for EU and EEA students, fact sheets from the EU on the deal and what it means, and also the link to the actual TCA, which, some 1,500 pages like reading for on a Sunday if you want to. So yeah, and it also has the link to the webinar, the immigration webinar that I recommended earlier on. So thanks everyone for listening. This was the chunky bit of it, and I'm happy to say that we've done it all under 45 minutes. I didn't want it to last any longer, but I think my colleague is pulling my other colleague Inga back up. Let me just get for myself. Yeah, there we are. And before we dive into the questions, Inga, is there anything you'd like to add from your perspective to what we've just been discussing? I think you're still on mute.
Yes, I just noticed, sorry. Nothing in particular to add, maybe to the list of links you had at the end. We also have, for those of you interested in particular in Horizon Europe, we have the UKRO fact sheet, which is on our website, so ukro.ac.uk, and we keep updating this, and this also gives you kind of further links to official documents on Horizon Europe participation and the latest, so I just add that to the list.
Okay, great, thank you. Then I'm going to dive into the chat function for the questions. So on Horizon, first question, I think it's two questions from David in the Embassy of Belgium. Hi, David. Is there likely to be a delay to the UK's ability to take part in the programs due to the association process? That's the first question. And the second, don't you fear to be expelled from Horizon Europe if the UK diverges too much in other areas? Inga, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I'm happy to take that one. So just to clarify, and I think Miriam referred to this as well, of course, association can only happen once the program exists. So we are waiting for the EU side of things. In that sense, the EU will need to finalize the regulation for Horizon Europe. This is an administrative process now, really. It needs the approval from the European Parliament still, and then it needs the final Council approval. There's no real changes expected. There's a high-level political agreement on the text, so the expectation is that there shouldn't be any major changes. In terms of the timeline, of course, the EU is trying to finalize this as quickly as possible, and we understand that association can then be really quickly finalized, given that the protocol 1 is there. It just needs to be signed. Even if there was a delay, and this is not something that was introduced just for this particular situation, this has happened in previous framework programs, the EU would normally have a footnote in calls for proposals to clarify that until the association is formally agreed, applicants can apply in the same way that other member states can apply, so there shouldn't really be an issue here in terms of the delay. And I think the second question I might struggle with a bit, but can you repeat it?
Yeah, sure. Let me just go back up because other questions are coming in. Do we fear to be expelled from Horizon Europe if the UK diverges too much in other areas?
So I think I won't go into too much detail, but there are kind of course, quite a lot of details in the protocol. There are clauses in there to help adjust things if things aren't going so well. So, for example, with regards to the participation, it's quite a lot of detail in there, but this has all been kind of looked into. There will also be a committee that will meet on a regular basis to look at UK participation in Horizon Europe, to look at any aspects that might not have been foreseen or that might come up. So from what I've seen in the protocol, I don't expect any kind of cutoff from one day to the other. This is really something that I think has been thought of, and that there are procedures for in place. But Miriam might want to add to this as well.
Yeah, I think that sounds right to me. I think, you know, the framework agreement within the TCA as a whole, which I mentioned before, does have the options if either side does want to end things, but that would be if there's a serious, you know, an issue to do with the kind of monies and making sure that it's in the best interest of both parties. I don't think that there's any situation where, you know, because of something else that was happening in the UK-EU relationship, that either party would choose to end that. I'd say that's unlikely, and hopefully not a situation we'll find ourselves in.
Yeah, and just to add as well, I think they've got a specific committee, right, where both the EU and the UK would then submit any issues, and it's quite a lengthy process. If you want to go down that road, it's quite a lengthy process, and it's not as if the UK could even, you know, if it wanted to quit from one day to the next. It's literally a process of years. So I would imagine that within that time span, solutions would be found for whatever problem there may be in the future. All right, moving on to the next, still an research-related question, to confirm if it is indeed association to the entire program, and what about, because there's been some confusion, I think, right, about the EIC. So if you could clarify that.
Yes, so there's one part of EIC that we are not going to participate in, and I think that has already been the case. Inga, do come in if any of this isn't accurate. So there's one part of EIC which is an equity fund. So it's essentially a fund that loans money to innovative businesses as part of the European Innovation Council, and the UK is not part of that previous Horizon, and it's not going to be part of that now. And you'll see in the protocol there's kinds of ways to fix that in terms of money and stuff like that, but that is the only part that we're not part of in terms of Horizon, and all the other aspects of Horizon we will be part of.
Brilliant, thank you, Miriam. All right.
And maybe just to add to that, the misconception we have that it is the entire pillar for some reason that the UK is excluded from that really isn't the case. The EIC fund is just an aspect of the EIC accelerator, which is again an aspect of the EIC fund. So it's really just that equity part that the UK is excluded from, and it's actually really a continuation from the last 2 years of what we had in Horizon 2020, where this was already the case. So in that sense, nothing has actually changed that much compared to those last 2 years.
Brilliant, thank you, Inga. I've got a question about the extension of interinstitutional agreements. What action is taken by the national agency to communicate the option to extend the grants and agreements until 2023? The national agency here in the UK is actually, as far as I'm aware, and I've seen it, actively making sure that the sector is aware of this. It's a commission measure, so I can't speak to national agencies across Europe. It would be up to them to either communicate that or decide what to do with it. If that doesn't, because it's quite a lengthy question, but I boiled it down to what I think is the core issue. But of course, you'll run into problems with partners if those deadlines aren't the same. If there's anything specific, please let me know in the chat. I'm happy to put you in touch with the British Council, who will give you more detailed information. If it's a partner outside of Europe who asked this question, I would recommend you to reach out to your own national agency, because of course they're responsible for it in your specific country. Next question. Scotland's share of outward mobility is currently about 1/5 of all UK mobility. Will money be allocated to Scotland in accordance with Barnett, or on the, I don't know if that's a typo, or I don't understand it, or on the basis of demand? I would imagine demand. So I can't speak to the details of the Turing Scheme because they are not out there yet. But I do know in the past that the government's been keen to make it work similar to Erasmus, and I know under Erasmus you just have to submit to the Commission a bid to what your funding is and what you would need. Don't quote me on this because none of this is confirmed for the next scheme, but I would imagine it probably would function in similar ways. So university would just have to look at their own international priorities and their own mobility flows to see what they would need. But again, I don't know this for sure. And this would all be given more information within a couple of weeks. Let's see, moving on. For the Turing Scheme, do we know which countries the UK will approach first to seek bilateral agreements? No, sorry, I can't. No, again, I think this would be more along the lines of further detail that the government would want to publish. But we at least we haven't been informed. And if anyone, I mean, this is a shout out to our European partners and colleagues viewing. If you hear anything within your country where your government is seriously considering match funding for your students to come to the UK, let us know, because we'd be very, very, very interested and keen to pick those conversations up. And I think it's crucial for us as a sector to work with our European partners to make this work. I'm just babbling on, but in case Miriam or Inga, you want to jump in, do jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as you've said, the way that this works is really on a, rather than country to country level, it's an institution to institution level. So what we're really hoping is that universities in the UK would approach universities that they're interested in doing a mobility program with anywhere in the world, and we're really very open about where that might be in Europe or indeed beyond. And similarly, if you're a university in Italy or Indonesia, it doesn't matter which, and you want to get in touch with the UK university and explore the idea of a bilateral program, then brilliant. And as Anne says, once the guidelines are published, you'll then be able to work out how to kind of put yourselves forward to deliver the scheme and access the funds for the UK side of that mobility. At the same time, of course, my team and others in embassies will be speaking to governments and trying to explore ways that we can support this. And so, you know, that is also another option if you're keen to get involved, or you know that your government's keen to get involved, that you don't have a clear sense of which university you want to approach, or you want to explore the idea more broadly first, then do contact the British Embassy team in your country as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Miriam. On to the next question. Do the short-term study arrangement also apply for short research mobilities? So no, they don't, because the short-term study is really for students. However, the excellent webinar I referred to, and the link is in the second to last slide, my colleague Harry Anderson, who is our expert on immigration, really walks you through, if you are a researcher from a university in Berlin, for example, and you're coming to the UK for an X amount of weeks or for a longer period, and he really walks you through all the different implications for the points-based system and what that means, also researchers coming to the UK. So I would highly, highly recommend you to have a look at that webinar. It will probably give you the answers you're looking for. All right, next question. In terms of visas, will academics visiting each other for a Horizon grant or conference need these, assuming there is no pay being made by the host institutions? So this would either fall under the what I referred to earlier in the webinar, which will walk you through what coming to the UK to work as a researcher, short to long term, would mean. In addition, what we are also, as part of the advice that we'll be publishing within a few weeks, we're also asked the legal firm to look at business trips, so short-term business trips, and what the requirements are. So we will be able to inform UK-based researchers who would then go to the EU. The other way around, I would have to come back to you on that answer, as I'm not the immigration expert, but I'm happy to do that offline. And let me have a look at next question, because we are almost out of time. Are you fighting for EU students not to pay international fees? So this is an interesting question. What you see happening across the sector is, but let me start with the legality of it. Legally, EU students are now subject to international fees. That is just the way it is because we've left the EU. and you'll run into potential difficulties legally if you differentiate. That being said, what we are doing is a couple of things we are doing. We are advising our universities on the legalities of all of this, and the long and short of it is that there is no risk-free option, because we've never been in this situation before, so we don't know what will happen. If a university decides to offer lower fees and then a non-EU international student in the same course sees that happening, could say, hold on a minute, why do they get reduced fees and I don't? They're international students now as well. So there is absolutely a risk of direct or indirect discrimination legally. And what we've said to our universities saying, look, there are options, things you can do, but know that no option is risk-free. And because none of this has been tested in the courts here in the UK, we simply don't know what will happen. That being said, universities themselves are looking into what can we do and what do we want to do, because of course this decision will very much depend on the international strategy of that university and how much students from the EU they're getting and how vital they are for the financial survival of a university, for example, not even talking about diversity on campus. But what we are working on, trying to, and this is a difficult, long process, but we are trying to see if we can get a UK-wide sort of scholarship scheme. You've got scholarship schemes for international students outside the EU, so it would just be an extension of that. So we're working with the government, but we're also working with our members. There is appetite, but how do you make it work and how do you make that work legally is something that we are working through. So yes, it's not, it is really up to each individual university. It doesn't work that way in the UK that you can say, okay, everyone, all universities now have to apply this international fee, which is lower for the EU students. It just doesn't work that way. And universities have that autonomy to decide. So within the boundaries that we have, we are trying to accommodate the changes and see what we can do. So I would say we are fighting for them, and we're fighting for them within the framework that we basically have and which we are faced with at the moment. Okay, let me have a look if there's other questions. Otherwise, I think it's really close to time. 3 more minutes. If there's one more, maybe. Let me have a look. Yes, we will send you the fact sheet that Inga mentioned. And I think, yeah, drawing it. Okay, my colleague behind the scene is saying there are a lot more questions, but due to timing, and they are very detailed, we need to wrap it up. But rest assured, and those who are regular visitors know this, we really do follow up offline. So all the questions you've submitted, we've got them in an Excel sheet, and we will come back to you and either answer them or refer you to people who are able to answer them. So don't worry, we will get back to you. Then just as a repeat and a reminder that the slides and the recording will be sent to you within a couple of days. And I just wanted to say a thank you to those who've followed us for the last 2.5 years. I hope these webinars were helpful. It really was us trying to help you navigate this Brexit landscape, and I hope you found them informative. A big thank you to Miriam for joining us today, and a big thank you to the Science and Innovation Network as a whole for really making these webinars a success. I remember we started out with the very first webinar, we had 250 people registering, we had 150 people watching, and today we had 1,200 registrations and almost 1,000 people actually watching. So it blew my mind, the kind of growth we've seen, and that's really truly due to our partners and everyone working together to make these a big success. Which means I'm also thanking Inga, not just for her participation today, but also for the support UKRO has given us over the last 2.5 years. We could not have done this and be as successful as we have been without SIN and UKRO. So a big thank you from me to you. And last but not least, I want to thank my absolute excellent colleague, Donna, behind the scenes, who has done all of the admin and tech support for each and every webinar since we started. Donna, I would be lost without you, as you know, because I'm not good at IT. So thank you so much for everything you've done. And just thank you for everyone for listening. I hope they were helpful. Have a nice rest of the afternoon or evening, depending on where you've watched us, and stay safe in these strange and uncertain times. And we'll see each other in a different format on different topics, not Brexit related. This is the end of these. So thank you so much for watching, and see you soon. Cheers, bye.